My dear friends, today we're going to talk about what are the hidden footprints in our relationships that actually govern how we structure and live within our relationships and what quality of experiences we derive from them. They govern our well being, they govern our happiness. So let's take a few minutes and explore these footprints and how we deal with them in a little more detail. So, to start with, we must recognize that our relationships form the most important part of our life's experience in this world. And yet, we do not often give our relationships the close attention that it deserves. If we did, we may be able to enrich our experiences, choose to be in the relationships that work for us, and keep away from the ones that don't work for us. But we can all agree that knowing, understanding, and defining our relationships is something that does not come easy or naturally to all of us. So today we're going to examine our relationships at three levels. Firstly, it's our relationship with ourselves. Next, it's our relationship with others. And finally, our relationship with nature, the environment, and the source of our creation, our Creator. Now, each of these three types of relationships leave their hidden footprints within us, which can bear a significant influence on how we approach life. So let us explore this subject further with the view to digging out these hidden footprints within our minds and understanding them better and understanding how they actually shape us in ways that are unknown to us. Let us start with self-definition, which involves defining our relationship with ourselves. So let us consider how each one of us views himself or herself. And we view ourselves from two levels. One is our external self, which we love and admire. When, for example, we look at ourselves in the mirror or receive positive feedback on our appearance and looks and comments on how great we appear, this all makes us feel good. It makes us feel validated, admired, and also drives the fashion and consumer industries big time. So our external self and our view and our relationship with our external self is one part in itself. I mean, look at how many images people post of themselves on social media and how they love getting the feedback. Makes us all happy. But there is a greater dimension to ourselves, which we need to pause and think about. Which brings me to the second level, which is our inner self. This is where many of us can have some difficulty because we are way too engrossed in the outer self. If you want to look at the inner self, you have to shift from standing in front of the mirror, like we are all accustomed to, and instead place that mirror within ourselves. So we have to shift our vantage point, place the mirror within ourselves. Now what do we see? This is where the process of self-definition occurs. And this is where the hidden footprints begin to emerge, taking that look within ourselves. Now, what is self-definition? In my understanding, and I would say that self-definition is the way in which we perceive and define our inner attributes and makeup. So it is the way in which we perceive and define our inner attributes and makeup. To do this, we have to take a deep dive and look within ourselves. And that's what we're going to try to achieve today, at least in some small way. So when I look at myself from within, in terms of my relationship with myself, what are the main aspects that immediately come to mind? First, I recognize how I'm conditioned so strongly by the things my parents and teachers and the things life has taught me so far. Secondly, I see how influenced I am by my beliefs, religion, traditions, culture, and lots of such phenomena. Then I see how I'm driven by my goals and visions of what I want from life. And this is a powerful aspect of ourselves. Our visions and goals are things we are all willing to work very hard for, and they drive us. Then I recognize my needs, and a need is something essential, something we absolutely need to survive in this world. So this can include basic resources, for example, our food, water, air, our loved ones, without whom life can be unbearable, etc., etc. And we all have a perception of our needs. What is our absolute need to survive? Next, I recognize my wants. Remember that there is a big difference between needs and wants. A want is something driven by our desires. It is not a need. And it can completely consume us if we let it. Now, examples of wants can include riches, immense wealth, popularity, experiences we want to have regardless of how expensive they may be, wanting to be powerful, or craving to be the center of attention, and more. And you can make your own list of what your wants are. And I also realize that my needs and wants play a big part in my relationship with myself. Then I recognize the way I have been accustomed to thinking and perceiving life. How everything has been and must be a certain way. That's how I'm conditioned. That's what I'm accustomed to. I realize my nature and personality. And as I keep looking, I zero into circumstances where I have felt the greatest level of comfort. And I recognize that these circumstances have now changed a lot, but I recognize those comfort circumstances where I like to default back to. So, my dear friends, all the footprints I have just defined heavily influence my relationship with myself. But then, reality is, in parallel, the wheels of life also keep turning. And I face challenges and disappointments. My plans don't often materialize the way I had envisioned them. I don't get what I need, or I don't get what I want, etc., etc. I call this life just happening as it wills. Life just happening as it wills. We can plan all we want. We can develop everything inside ourselves. We can establish a definition of ourselves. But life is going to happen the way it's going to happen. So, and this part of life brings experiences that can shape me very differently because they leave within me their own new footprints. Do I accept this new reshaping? Do I accept these new footprints? Or do I resist and stick to the shape and footprints I have always wanted for myself? Choice is mine. This is where the whole concept of definition and redefinition of relationships emerges. And to explain this concept, let me share a true life experience with you, which I hope may open new avenues of thought within you. Many years ago, in the UK, we used to have regular events like we have now online, but we used to all meet once a month in the UK for the meditation and healing events. And at one of them, this man walks in with his child, and she was 10 at the time, and she had a very rare form of cancer that afflicts about 50 children every year in the UK. And there's tumors everywhere in the body. And they had reached a point where the doctors were saying that she will not see her 11th birthday, and that, most of these children do not survive. They went to church, and someone said to them, look, we've been to this meditation event. Why don't you go and learn? Maybe it'll help you. And so they came, and we started, and they learned how to meditate. They didn't know anything about it. They learned how to meditate. They started working on helping the daughter heal herself. Her name was Louise, is Louise. And the mother used to be a very successful senior executive of marketing in a very large corporation. But when this happened to her daughter, she gave up everything and focused on making sure that her daughter not only survived, but got well. And her daughter was so committed to getting well that she loved ballet, and she used to keep her ballet shoes on her window and keep saying to herself, I will be doing ballet again. And if you looked at the tumors in her body, you would say, most of us would say, it's not possible. But guess what? It did become possible. She was one of those very rare cases who survived. And her parents were extremely dedicated. The reason I mention them by name, because they used to come, many of you who attended those UK sessions will know this family that I'm speaking about. But they would share their experience and watching their daughter go from what she was to what she became. And I remember that, I said to her, when you do your first ballet, I'll be celebrating with you. And if I'm nearby, I will attend. And she did do her first ballet. And in fact, when she turned 18, it was so synchronous. The synchronicity works in such a strange way. I was sick, and I was in hospital in Dubai. And the phone rings, and it's her. And she says, I'm calling to tell you that I'm celebrating my 18th birthday. I'm going out with my parents, and I have a boyfriend, and we are celebrating, and I just want to tell you that I'm thinking of you, and I want to say thank you. And honestly, it just made my day, my week, my year hearing from her, and she's doing well with God's grace. But during this period, after a few months, I remember one day her mother, her name's Sarah, was saying to me that this whole challenge, because it's very hard when anybody is faced with that type of a challenge of potentially losing their child. So delicate, because there's no immune system. It was very, very difficult challenge, which, my hats out to her and her husband and the family for the way they rallied around Louise. And she was telling me that, this crisis has crushed me. She said it has damaged, my life. And I said, no, don't say that. I said, think of it as the universe is redefining you. You had defined yourself as that successful executive who was going places in her career. Suddenly everything came to a stop. It didn't destroy you. Your daughter is getting better. She's going to survive. You have so much to celebrate, and you are one of the most amazing mothers I have ever come across. So you have so much to celebrate. And I said, you're being redefined. And the universe is redefining you in a beautiful way, where you will emerge stronger, more capable, more powerful than you've ever been. And she looked at me and she said, wow, yeah. And she took that on board. And the minute she accepted that she was being redefined, she stopped looking back and lamenting about what she thought she had lost, but rather looking ahead and looking forward to what the universe had in mind for her in terms of her new definition and where she was going to go. And this story has a very nice ending, because she then, after her daughter got well, she then started her own firm, and she just went from strength to strength. But she accepted that it was a redefinition of herself. She stopped clinging to that person that she thought, wow, I was so successful. Of course you were successful then. You are successful today. Your child is better. You're going places, and you will be more successful tomorrow. Accept the redefinition. Accept it. Embrace it. So this is what I mean about redefining ourselves. Our self-definition today impacts how we view ourselves and in the future. So this is a very important aspect to recognize, that if we have to redefine, we have to first know what is defined. And in these contexts, you can take an inward look in that mirror and see who and what you are and define yourself. It's a very healthy exercise. Now, if we don't think about it and we just keep going on with life, then we also project our definition into the future. And we drive life in that direction because it causes us to make decisions in the present that sometimes can be best for us and sometimes not. And I share a simple example with you of a young lady who we know. She always had this vision of having a life, a very stable life, very community oriented. She wanted to be a leader in the community. She wanted a house in suburbia with a white picket fence, and this is the world she wanted. And yet she fell in love with a guy, a young man who wanted to conquer the world and live with no geographical or mental boundaries. So these two wanted different things. And these two were very different at one level and a great couple at another level. So what happened? They didn't make it as a couple, but both ended up fitting into what they wanted, and they were lucky that way because they both got what they wanted. But what remained unresolved was their love and their dreams of a life together, because when they went their separate ways, the love was still very much alive then. So that remained unresolved. And I would say that it will remain an open-ended matter for the rest of their lives. Hopefully they will both be too busy and occupied with life and family, and to a point where these feelings and dreams get concealed over time. But rest assured, the subject will keep popping up from time to time in their quiet moments of introspection. But they were young, so they just went by what they felt. And this subject could potentially in future, when realizations change or things change, could potentially trigger challenging actions and decisions. It's an open-ended possibility. So we see from the example of this young couple that both of them remained stuck to their own self-definitions, including decisions of the future. They didn't know about it. When they were together as a unit, both of them actually had the option to jointly redefine themselves within the umbrella of their love and friendship and relationship. And I'm not saying any one option would have been better than the other. I'm simply highlighting the options each one of us has for recognizing our definition and redefinition. So just like the mom, Sarah, I told you about, once she recognized that the universe was redefining her through her drastic change in circumstances, and she embraced the redefinition and went down a path of success, happiness, and fulfillment. She did not resent it anymore and stopped looking behind, lamenting what she once was. And that's an important point to reflect upon. So this lovely couple also got what they wanted, but something remained unresolved. If they had taken the time to define and redefine, they might have ended up with a different outcome. Maybe they might not have. But this is an opportunity for us all to say we have the option. And the reason we're talking about it today is now let's start thinking about our own lives and our own definition and where we need to redefine, if we need to redefine. So what we can draw from these two examples is to recognize that we can all define and redefine ourselves, to flow with life rather than swim against it, or to cling tightly to that branch while the river flows past us. This is our choice. And if we choose not to redefine ourselves, then let us be consciously aware and clear about why we chose not to, and then go down the course of our choice. The worst thing any one of us can do is to move on without thinking about these options and land wherever we get to, almost like an accidental object, without recognizing the options and opportunities we may have been or we may have obliviously walked past. So I'm saying let's open our eyes. And the universe is very kind because it keeps giving us second chances. So now, going forward, we may want to proceed with life with our eyes open. That's my important point I want to make. And experiencing what can potentially be a richer journey. The same events, the same journey, but more enriched because we're conscious. In nature, there's a creature called the chameleon, who you all know, who constantly changes its color based on its surroundings. This is an example of ultimate fluidity and of definition and redefinition in nature. What does a chameleon get from this process of redefining itself with its surroundings? Security, access to food, freedom to move from one surrounding to another without worrying about predators, moving with greater safety than other creatures, and other advantages, and you can think about a few. Now, I'm not saying we should all be like chameleons, but I'm simply showing how nature's message of definition and redefinition is so beautifully encapsulated and exemplified by the chameleon. Flexibility. And the best part about life is that each one of us has options. And now, here are three of these options. 1, to redefine ourselves. 2, to stick firm to our historical definitions. Or 3, to find some new middle ground. We have these three options. And my goal is to highlight to you that we have these options to consider on a constant basis. So as a minimum, I would say be aware of your options. Think each one through, and then move forward, because of course your life is based on your decisions. And up to today, many of us may not have thought of this concept in the way I'm presenting it. So I'm bringing it to the table for consideration. The next type of definition and redefinition I want to put forward is how we enter into, live within, and manage our relationships with others. Now, here we need to be extremely honest with ourselves to really understand how to maximize the physical, mental, and emotional value of each relationship. Firstly, we need to recognize that we human beings are very selfish creatures. We are made one way when we are born, and we evolve into selfish beings because our material life conditions us to be so. It makes us more insular if we allow it. Hence, we all have the veil of selfishness that covers our eyes when it comes to truly understanding our motivations. Behind each relationship, we invest our time and emotions into. We never question our motivations. Maybe it's time to do that. So let us look at some typical life scenarios to understand this better. I'll throw some at you. So Jane is a marketing professional, and she is highly driven to get ahead in her career, both within her company and with her clients. So Jane maps out who in the company can help her meet her objectives. She strategically looks at who are in the right positions and maps out, and then she works hard at making friends with these people and building close relationships with each one of these people. They respond positively to her friendship and actually accept her as a friend. But in actual fact, Jane is not their friend. She only does things for them, goes drinking and partying with them, and even gets intimate with some of them because she wants one thing from the relationship: to get ahead in her career. Now, Jane may not even be consciously aware that she is using these people. But when the opportunity arises, she doesn't hesitate to stab any one of them in the back to get what she wants. And once she has gotten what she wants, she moves on to the next set of relationships that work for her. Because the current friendships have now lost their value, and she sees no more benefit in them and therefore doesn't want to put any more time into them. So Jane consciously discounts the value of every relationship that does not serve her needs anymore. How can we ever discount a person? It's a bizarre concept, but it happens all the time. This example comes across a bit harsh in nature, I realize that. But rest assured, we are all surrounded by Janes or male versions of Jane. We are, and let's not kid ourselves. Or we may ourselves be like her and simply not be aware of it. The good news is that Jane represents only one of countless range of types of relationships we live within. But the one I just shared with you should be thought about. Other typical examples can include relationships with our biological family, or relationships with our friends, from close friends to acquaintances to colleagues, etc., or parent-child relationships, or people in love, people in marriage or a cohabitation type of relationship, partners at work and in business, and others. And we can imagine different scenarios for each one of these categories of relationships and come up with so many potential outcomes and scenarios. We can all do that when we have time. But what is important from all the above discussion is to appreciate that each relationship has a definition. And we need to take the time to understand this definition. Then we have three possibilities after we recognize and understand this definition. Possibility number one, we are happy with our definition and we go along happily with the relationship, leaving the status quo exactly as it is. That's one possibility. Second possibility is if we are not happy, we redefine it by redefining ourselves, preferably from a healthy perspective. For example, if Jane were to evaluate her relationships with her work colleagues and all those who she has targeted and groomed strategically, and realize that her relationships here are being defined as being opportunistic, self-serving, and convenient. This is how she would define her relationships if she were honest. And you can define your relationships similarly in these brief ways. And if she realizes that she's opportunistic, self-serving, and convenient, these are her relationships, and furthermore, that her motives are totally selfish in nature or unreasonable, then with this realization, she could redefine herself and approach her friendships from a more sincere perspective, giving her the opportunity to work towards redefining each one of these relationships, hopefully towards a better experience for all parties. Alternatively, she accepts who she is by her own definition and is happy to continue with her predatory ways. That is also possible. So that's the second part. And the third possibility is that we conclude that maybe we don't want to be in this relationship. After we analyze and look at our definition, maybe we feel maybe this relationship is not for us. In that case, we follow a path of divergence with as much empathy and sensitivity as possible. So my dear friends, when defining a relationship, we have to ask a number of questions. Here are some typical examples that we should explore in complete honesty. Starting from our motivations for being in the relationship, to understand what our experiences with the relationship have shown, and how we foresee the future of this relationship, as defined, redefined, or with another type of structure, whatever it may be. Remember, the key is to be honest. Now, I would ask myself questions such as, why am I in this relationship? This question merits a lot of thought because it's a deep question. It doesn't have a single one-word answer. What do I wish to get from it? Here we have to be honest and clear with ourselves as much as possible, and we have to realize where we are selfish, where our motivations lie. We just need to be able to see it as bare truth. 3, What value do I place on this relationship? And this value can be of a material or emotional nature, or it can be absolutely priceless and beyond all forms of value. But let's consider it. Another question I would ask is, am I willing to make sacrifices for this relationship? This helps us assess our own level of commitment to the relationship. Because if we're not willing to make sacrifices, then we're not committed. Then what are we doing here? Will I have any interest in its continuation if I don't receive what I wish for? Thankfully, the answer to this question is often yes in the case of many types of relationships. And this answer helps us to sift out our conditional relationships from our unconditional ones. Remember, conditional relationships to unconditional ones. A very healthy exercise to know which one's which and how we foresee each relationship. Then there is a question of, does this relationship fulfill me or drain me or neither? This is more to recognize how we are managing this relationship. How can we make it better, for example? So it's a constructive exploration. How long do I see this relationship lasting? Short term, medium term, long term? And you can add your own questions and thoughts to this list. But it is easier to define our own position in a relationship because we only have one person to answer to, which is ourselves. It gets more difficult to define a relationship based on our perceptions of another person, though, because we don't know enough about them, or their motivations, or their background. Remember, the side of the paper we see with a person is the blank side. We also don't know their deep inner thought process. So if we choose to evaluate others, then each one of us needs to come up with a fair set of questions to do this, bearing in mind we only have our opinions, biases, perceptions, and experiences to go by. And we could be totally wrong with them. But here are some examples of possible questions, and you can think of more. But I would say, what do I think he or she wants from our relationship? Why do I think he or she has chosen to be in this relationship with me and invest time, energy, emotion? How do I perceive how he or she values this relationship based on our interactions and experiences with one another? Do I perceive he or she is committed to this relationship? Remember, I keep using the word perceive. Do I perceive he or she is committed to this relationship? Does it appear to me as a conditional or unconditional relationship? So these are just some examples of our potential thought processes. But we all have to be very objective here and recognize fully that we are only examining our perceptions, which can be completely wrong. So let's be careful. And as I said earlier, it is easier to evaluate ourselves than it is to evaluate others. And that in itself is a good start. So starting with self-definition is a lot better. Now let us look at an example of what happens when we fail to fairly define our relationship with someone. This example is based on a real-life observation, but I'm going to use names of people that are not connected to who they really are. But there was a businessman, let's call him Ash, who was quite successful and kind-hearted and caring towards others. Ash hires Sid for a senior position in his company, and the two of them become friends. Ash and his family welcome Sid into his family, into their family home during all celebrations and landmark family events. Sid has a daughter who becomes very ill and needs a complex and very expensive surgery which he cannot afford. Ash agrees to pay for the child's surgery. During the course of their 5-year relationship, Sid actually receives a lot of help and favors from Ash. Then Ash's company gets taken over and he's no longer in full control. However, he works with the new owners to achieve a smooth transition as possible. But part of this transition requires a restructure where Sid's position has to be terminated. And Ash does his best to make sure that Sid gets the best severance package possible. He goes out of his way for his friend. But Sid is not happy. He feels Ash has betrayed him, and he breaks off their friendship and distances himself and his family from Ash's family. Then he takes Ash to court with more claims, and the whole scenario ends up as a tragic mess, actually a disaster. It appears to me that Sid failed to define and understand his relationship with Ash. If he had done so, he would have found that their relationship was defined by words such as supportive, beneficent, inclusive, and generous, where Ash was concerned. Very nice definition of the relationship. This would have helped Sid realize that 90% of the time, he was the beneficiary of Ash's generosity and kindness. And this would have made him consciously aware about what his friend did for him on a continuous basis. Instead, when the chips were down, he forgot the 9 things Ash had done right for him and simply broke off the relationship because of the one thing Ash could not do for him. When we look at Sid, we can make the following observations. He was an opportunist and a taker, possibly. Like Jane, he was in the relationship to get as much as he could, one possibility. Or 2, he never paused to think about his relationship with Ash and define this relationship in a fair and objective manner. If he had done so, he would have remembered all the things Ash had done right by him and not broken off the relationship because of one disappointing outcome which he construed as being let down. My friends, dear friends, we forget all the good things a friend or loved one has done for us because we only see the one thing he or she may have done wrong. We all make mistakes. We all get things wrong all the time, very often, or time and over again. But why penalize people who have added so much value to our lives just because we fail to recognize their real contribution or value? And let us not forget that we are perfectly capable of making the same mistakes in another relationship. So my dear friends, most of the times we don't define and redefine our relationships consciously and objectively. Hence, we only react to the last set of emotions we feel. We see time and again how a person always gets remembered for his or her last mistake, but seldom for all the countless things he or she did right. This is because we as a society, as a humanity, have become oblivious towards consciously recognizing and defining our relationships. Therefore, let me conclude by saying that the concept of definition and redefinition can add so much value to our relationships. We only have upside with this mindset. So let us consider embracing it fully. And finally, my dear friend, there is one more important aspect to consider, which is the definition and redefinition of our relationship with our Creator. This is a spiritual perspective, but also draws heavily upon our material thinking. So let us quickly look at a couple of scenarios. So Josh is a devout follower of his faith, and he does everything he can to maximize his reward from his Creator. Pray like this at this hour, and you get 100-fold reward. Give charity in this manner, and you get 1,000-fold reward. If you do A, B, or C, then this is the type of penalty that will follow, etc., etc. If Josh did an honest evaluation of his relationship with his Creator, he would realize that this relationship could be defined as transactional and consequential. Transactional and consequential. And once he realizes this, he can redefine his relationship with his Creator in a direction that could possibly be far more spiritually uplifting for him. For example, another example is a young lady called Samira, who doesn't think of her Creator in good times and runs to him when in trouble. she would end up defining her relationship with her creator as conditional. Knowing that, she can redefine her relationship in a healthier manner. Then there is Santosh, who meditates every morning for years and gets upset very often when he can't focus, or when time passes by without him having experienced the light he is seeking. He would define his relationship with the Creator, for example, as impatient and expectation-based. And finally, then there is Jiang, who lives in the mountains of Tibet, who is deeply in love with his Creator, and he meditates regularly and expects nothing in return. Every day for him is a new opportunity to experience enlightenment. And he is simply grateful and happy and content that he is able to try this for every day, and grateful for the opportunity. He would define his relationship with his Creator as unconditional and filled with contentment and endless gratitude. He is happy with this definition as is and sees no need to redefine his relationship. So, my dear friends, it is helpful for us to reflect in complete honesty upon what our relationship is with our Creator. Ask yourself, what is my true relationship with my Creator? And then try to define it as best as we can at a deep individual and private level, because this is a private matter. If we are happy with our definition, wonderful, great. If not, then each one of us has the opportunity to redefine it starting today. So this is the message I wanted to share with you today, and I hope it has left you with helpful food for thought.